The following broadcast does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of AM 1450, its staff, or board of directors.
Good evening. This is Kai Hagen, back this week with Eye on Our Community. Today we have a special show talking about the show and about some of the plans that we have in the coming weeks and months to expand the format, to do some live shows, to cover a wider variety of subjects. Want to introduce you to a couple of special guests that will be helping out with that show, both as co-hosts and as guest hosts at times. In the studio today, we've got Michael Betteridge, first of all, who is the producer of the show. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
We also have Jim Racheff and Katherine Heerbrandt. Jim's been on the show before, and Katherine's probably familiar to a lot of radio listeners in the area and readers of local media, and they'll have a moment to introduce themselves shortly. But first, I wanted to just hand the mic over to Michael and have him explain a little bit about what we're doing here today.
Yeah. Thanks, Kai. There's been this evolution of this community program, Eye on Our Community. I don't know if you remember us talking about it, but it started out as Thermont World for many, many years. And the guest host was George Wireman. George, for many, many years, did the show. And then Vicki Grinder took over for a little while. And we sort of made it more Frederick County oriented as we expanded our outreach and started to go into, raise our signal and that sort of thing. And we called it Eye on Our Community. We were doing it once a week and bringing in local interviews of interview book authors and guest hosts and that sort of thing and politics. But we thought that it might be interesting to expand this to do the political side of this, especially since we had such an historic election recently in our county. And as we did that, more and more people came and said, you should be doing this every day of the week. We'd love to have an afternoon drive show. So we've decided we're going to expand it and do that and try to do some live call-ins and talk to you. And really the objective, Kai, as you and I have discussed, is to keep this as balanced as we can, to do really balanced and fair coverage. Because let's be honest, we had a rather chippy election this year, didn't we?
That happens.
Yeah. And so we talked about balanced coverage and being able to look at all sides of the topics and the issues and the political spectrum and the things that people bring to the table. So that's sort of the background of how we got to where we are. We're going to be doing this every evening at 5 o'clock from 5 to 6 p.m. to start. And so it'll be a lot of fun, I think, don't you?
I do. I'm looking forward to it. I've done some live shows with other local radio stations just as a guest, and the opportunity to consider ways to use that extra time to bring in a variety of interesting guests to really have some in-depth conversations about a lot of the issues and events and personalities and things happening in the county is exciting. And if it works out, and as we've talked about expanding it to 5 to 7. We'd be able to have 2 hours a day, and that's a real opportunity, especially if you're interacting with some of the folks in the community who can call in, because we haven't been doing this show live before. Yeah. So one of the things we want to do, since we're talking about as much as 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, is to have a team together to help make sure that we're providing interesting coverage, that we're able to, be doing that every day. And we've got two people who I feel very honored and privileged to introduce, who have volunteered to participate in this endeavor. Jim Racheff, who I mentioned, and Katherine Heerbrandt. And I'd just like to give both of them a chance to take a minute or two and talk a little bit about their engagement in the community and their thoughts about being on the show.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and thank you for having me here. This is the second time I've been in this little studio. I've been on the show before when Vicki Grinder was the host. But just by way of quick background, I have many years as a journalist in Frederick County, now freelancing for some local publications, and did host my show on a different station in Frederick County for a long time and make some appearances there. But I did grow up in Thurmont. We moved here in 1971, so it's near and dear to my heart, and it's kind of cool to be here on Radio Lane, a place I used to deliver papers to. Oh. Back in the day.
Wow, that's cool.
Yep, back in the day. I am really old, but thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope with the three of us that this isn't going to be an echo chamber, and anytime you want somebody to play devil's advocate, I am your person. I can argue anything. I just ask my husband.
Well, and you're good at asking questions, too. So making sure that other people who will be on the show.
Absolutely.
Yes,
fun times.
Not so much putting their feet to the fire, but giving them a good opportunity to respond to.
Oh, you're so polite. Yes.
And over in this corner, we have Jim Racheff. Why don't you take a moment, Jim, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Kai. I grew up in the area as well, not this far north, down between Newmarket and Mount Airy, and a Linganore High graduate, so I hope that folks up North County won't hold that too much against me.
Hey, I'll be there tonight. I'm doing a basketball game there tonight.
Well, I love seeing the bumper sticker on the car, so I always feel welcome when I come up here. I grew up here, and me and my wife have a couple of young children and a couple of small businesses that we run here in the Frederick area, and then I've also been fortunate enough to be allowed and asked to be involved in the community. So I chair the zoning board in the city of Frederick, involved on the boards of a couple of nonprofits, United Way, Frederick Community College, Mount St. Mary's Board of Visitors, things of that nature. Also done the radio circuit every once in a while as a guest, and you and I have been on before, and Katherine and I have been on before. So looking forward. I think it's going to be some good chemistry and some good conversation. I don't think anyone in this room is shy about sharing their opinion.
But I do think that one of the things that makes me very grateful that you're both interested in participating in this is that you're both very knowledgeable about the community, both in breadth and depth. I mean, you're interested in a broad range of issues. You've been participating in the community for a long time, and we're going to try to cover a lot of interesting subjects. And some of them are, sharing information about things that are going on, and some of them are going to be a little more controversial. And I think one of the interesting challenges is how do you bring a rich conversation that does provide people with useful information, but doesn't shy away from some of those difficult elements, but does it in a way that is still civil and thoughtful.
Oh, wait, you didn't tell me we had to be civil. I got to retract my agreement.
We baited her.
You lured me in.
It occurs to me that really, when we had this discussion, the reason that we're doing this was because you did such an excellent job, Kai, of keeping it balanced and keeping your perspective. And I think you surprised a lot of people.
I'm not quite sure how to respond to that.
I think what he's saying is people expect that you're going to take a certain side on certain issues because you've been so visible in the community, obviously as a county commissioner, and now do envision that you're also very opinionated. Everyone knows where you stand.
That's true. I do have a few opinions on a few things in our community. I try to make them informed opinions. But no, I think that's a good point, though, Michael. And I think that what will be interesting about this transition is I've been interviewing people. And so I've seen my role as an interviewer trying to bring them out and have them focus on their story and the things that they're interested in a friendly but insightful manner. And so it'll be interesting to transition to a situation where we're having a variety of discussions and I'm participating a little bit more as myself and not just an interviewer, and trying to have the balance in that will be an important part of having balance in the show. But I'm sure I will have an opportunity to express more than a few opinions. So we're going to be back in a moment. Thank you for listening. This is Kai Hagen with Eye on Our Community. We're here today with Jim Racheff and Katherine Heerbrandt and Michael Betteridge on the other side of the microphone today.
You won't believe it. They think we're lovers. Kept undercover. I'll just ignore it. But they keep saying we laugh just a little too loud.
Guy Hagen with Eye on Our Community. And if you've been listening, we're here today with a full studio. Full because it's small, But we have Michael Betteridge, the station owner and producer, joining the conversation today, along with hello, thank you, along with Jim Racheff and Katherine Heerbrandt. And we've been talking about the fact that Eye on Our Community is going to be expanding to a more frequent time, but also a broader format where we're doing a lot of the shows live. And for the first time, with the exception of election night, we'll be able to interact with listeners and who call in and have questions or other 2 cents to throw into the mix. So I thought one of the things that would be good, and this is going to happen, maybe Michael, you have something to add to it, but this is going to happen over the course of the next month or two. We've talked about doing an hour a day at first and seeing how it goes and picking a time to expand. But do you want to say anything about that?
Well, I think most people don't realize that live community radio is hard. I mean, it's easy to put some kind of packaged CD program thing up on the air and run it. It doesn't cost a lot of money, but doing a lot, but that's what we're here for. I mean, we are a community radio station. That's what we're here for, and it's really hard. And the hardest part is the people involved. So I want to thank each of you personally for being here, because without you, this doesn't happen. Because it's a commitment. It's really a commitment that requires work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, wait,
you
no
didn't
one
tell me
told me
that.
that.
Yeah, I'm getting this out here right now in the beginning. You have
I
to
said, just come and be yourself, Catherine.
You have to do your homework sometimes. Yes, there will be homework assignments.
Oh, my goodness.
But it requires that the effort be put forth to show up at certain times, which sometimes don't fit into your schedule or in different. Anyway, the bottom line is that we really look forward to having good dialogue, community live radio with feedback from everyone, and just to be able to talk about some of the issues that are burning in our hearts in the world that we live in, especially this beautiful, wonderful community of Frederick County.
Well, I think one of the things that's going to be different right off the bat is in the shows that we've done so far, we've had a couple times, 2 guests, but to talk for essentially 42 minutes of airtime about a very specific issue. Or their campaign when we were talking to the candidates. And so it's really been an interview format. They're not interrupted by any calls. You have your notes and you're prepared to ask certain questions. And, those conversations have gone well. But it's going to be interesting to talk about a much broader variety of subjects in ways that are sometimes going to be unpredictable based on the current events of the week, what a particular caller might have in mind, and just the dynamics of that conversation, and still keep it interesting and informative. I think is going to be an interesting challenge. But one of the things that I thought would be good to talk about a little bit today is sort of looking ahead at a lot of the issues that are on the horizon. There'll be things nobody can predict. That always happens.
Oh,
for sure.
Yeah.
But we can, yeah.
How we all went viral.
Yes. That's a good
With
example.
one of our county council members.
Nobody would have ever. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Wasn't that something? I mean, it was just, that's a great example of the power of information it's a completely different world than it was. That would have never happened 5 years ago, would it?
Well, it's normally a big deal when Frederick County makes the Baltimore Sun or the Washington Post.
Are we not saying the names?
Oh, we can talk
Kirby,
about it.
say my name. Say my name.
Yeah, actually, we probably should say the name given, but
and we're right here in his hometown. Do you think he'll come up and let us interview him here?
He's been here before.
Has he?
Yeah.
With Kai?
We kept Kai away from. No, he was here with me.
I could see we could get to the point where I'd be part of a conversation with Kirby, even though we have butted heads on a few issues. I think
I think Kirby's probably laying low right now. I can't imagine he hasn't changed his name at this point, because he is known worldwide. So it's kind of interesting. I did hear that Bethany Rogers, the reporter now who's known for First Amendment rights, I say go for it. Find another job right now. You're a hot commodity right now.
Hot topic, right?
So she's lamenting the fact that here she toils away on certain pieces and investigative, works really hard on something, and a little Facebook post about Kirby threatened to sue her makes her name worldwide.
To her credit, I will say, since it was just a Facebook post, it could have been a comment really under a post. It could have been a more sort of throwaway comment, and it wasn't. It was a very, very good post. That comment held up, and I think that she can be proud of.
Yeah, she stuck up for herself.
Whoa, hold everything.
Right.
So where were we where's the spot?
I said, wait a minute. Wasn't this whole thing generated by just a simple social media post?
It was. Kirby posted on his own Facebook page, and as it turned out, he decided to tag Bethany to make sure she saw it, and because he tagged her, the way things work, a lot of other people were able to see it, and it went viral.
So then there's a topic that we need to discuss. The power of social media that's beginning to take over and drive agendas and that sort of thing. That's something that's everybody's starting to deal with.
Well, I think it'll come up. I mean, I don't doubt that there'll be fodder for future discussions that come up based on conversations that evolve online and that raise the prospect of an issue being more significant, for example, than anybody might have thought.
Yeah, but then, okay, so here's what bothers me about that in a way, having been a journalist and I've done TV, radio, and print. It's nothing really to brag about because it's all been in Frederick County. So I have never gone beyond the bounds of Frederick County. But here's the thing.
You mean you weren't on the BBC?
No, honey. It was local origination channel for Frederick Cablevision back in the day. But trying to get people interested in media issues, and then we have, just like Bethany said, here she'll work hard on a story that she thinks is really important with information that, is relevant to people on a daily basis as they go about their lives. And then this one silly thing is what people pay attention to. It kind of disturbs me in a way, but I don't know. It's a dilemma.
Well, one of the things that we've talked about a little bit specific to this during some of the conversations we've had with people in the community during the transition process to charter government here is that, now this is what we're known for. Right. And so we've got this wonderful opportunity. We've got a new county executive. We've got a new form of government. We have all these wonderful assets in Frederick County that we could all talk about being longtime residents here. But the thing that we're known for is the guy that made this statement and was in the paper in Australia and England and France and, just all over the place. And in a way, it feels like it's a step backwards, especially if we're trying to attract businesses and investment and, folks to kind of take us seriously. It's nice to get some positive press to bounce that out.
Well, you guys, it's interesting because you both just brought up interesting elements that are both really substantial and worth talking more about. I do think you have this issue, as Jim is saying, what is the identity of this community? I do think that 100 times more people are going to remember Kirby DeLauder instead of Frederick County who heard this, and a lot of them aren't that relevant, to what we're trying to accomplish here.
Sure.
But it's still an important question: is what is the identity of the community? How do we, work to highlight our assets and tell the story that we want to tell, the true story about what's wonderful about this community? But part of that relates to what Katherine was saying, and that is, to get people interested in and informed about and talking about the kinds of things that sometimes are a little more mundane or humdrum or challenging, right? It takes there are a little more rigorous demands on your time or, doing a little homework or knowing a little bit of background or showing up for something. We have a lot of issues in our community that are really important. And yet, you look at voter turnout, you look at the number of people who are paying attention to things, you look at the traction that certain issues have, and yet something comes up that has a certain kind of controversy or drama or personalities. And while on the one hand you understand why that generates a little bit of excitement and attention, it does really make the point that there are all these other things that you wish people were paying a little more attention to and talking about. One example that I use is if you go back to Michael Cady, who was a commissioner in 2002, 2006. He did a lot of things, good and bad things. He worked very hard as a commissioner. I got to know him. We butted heads on some things, agreed on some things, generally got along. After 4 years of being a commissioner, when you come down to an election, and the two basic things that most people seem to know about him who don't pay a lot of attention was the hat episode with the park employee and the sock puppets in Brunswick.
At the fair. Yeah.
And so sometimes that doesn't seem fair either, So time zipped by in that segment, but we'll be back in a moment. This is Kai Hagen and Eye on Our Community, and thank you for being with us today.
saying we laugh just a little too loud, stand just a little too close, we stand just a little too long. Maybe they're seeing something we don't, darling. Let's give them something to talk about.
Welcome back. This is Kai Hagen with Eye on Our Community. We're back for the second half of our show today. We have with us in the studio Michael Betteridge, who's the owner and operator and producer of all things at WTHU here, at 1450 AM. But we're also with Katherine Heerbrandt and Jim Racheff, and we've been talking about the fact that this show is going to take a more expanded format and become a daily show, an hour, maybe 2 hours a week before long, and often live with call-in opportunities and a broader range of discussion. And it's been livelier than normal already. Maybe that's partly because of my company. But so one of the things that we're focusing on today is how we discuss some of these issues as a community and what we can do to kind of enhance that discussion, sharing information with people in Frederick County. But we wanted to make sure we kind of took a look, sort of a 30,000-foot view, or is it a 10,000-foot view of all the things that are happening in the county that are going to be subject ripe for discussion and important for people to be talking about and thinking about over the next year. So we do have, Jim mentioned a moment ago, the transition to charter. We're less than 2 months, really just a month and a half since the inauguration. So it's a new thing still being figured out. The council's only met a few times. There's still appointments to be made. They're trying to figure things out. What do we see as some of the big issues that the charter government and the county executive are going to be facing that's going to be in the news and in the conversations in Frederick County over the next month, the next year, the next couple of years?
Yeah, I'm chairing the transition team for County Executive Gardner. Really, the challenge that we have, and Kai, I think you and I talked about this the last time that you invited me on the show. We really have these multiple transitions going on. So it's not only a transition to a new leadership, it's transition to a new form of government. And the one thing that we're finding is that there's a lot of things undetermined and still unclear about how the council and the county executive will function and interact with each other. Definitely when you talk about staff as large as county employees are and all the different direct and indirect relationships there, just people trying to figure out how they interact, who they interact with, the simple thing that happens normally when you have a BOCC transition. Who are going to be the liaisons? Who are going to be the liaisons to different commissions or to different organizations? Are they county liaisons? Are they county executive liaisons? Right. Just all these sort of operational details. It's going to take a while to suss out. I know I've heard some criticisms in the community about how some of the council meetings have kind of been run and been, operated.
What kind of concerns?
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say is to me, criticisms about if motions were made correctly or if people were speaking things, Robert's Rules of Order types of criticisms and
snore.
It's going to take those guys. And you have 5-6 months.
You have to figure that out.
Sure.
You have to, you think that some of that stuff is just automatic, but even when you transition from one board of county commissioners to another, you've got people who have, in some cases, been on the board before and some who haven't, but this is a very different kind of transition, and so people are sitting in new positions. They're all in new positions. They don't all know each other, and they're going to have to figure that out.
Who's the expert? Who's the go-to person for, are we abiding by the charter the way it's written?
Right. Right now, I would say that those questions are going to John Mathias in the county attorney's office. But it's a lot. The charter is a very small broad document.
Right.
They intentionally picked a version that was general in nature. And in doing so, all these finer details aren't spelled out. And so often it's negotiated as they come up.
Well, that makes it more of a workable, flexible living document,
I agree.
correct? Is that why they did it? Or
Yeah, I
okay.
think so. What they ended up doing is they adopted the same charter that Cecil County did.
Right.
I think word for word.
You're kidding.
No,
Well,
I'm
it
pretty
wasn't. They used it as the basis, and they did keep a lot of it. There
Yeah.
are
Because
some
they spent a
I
differences.
thought, it was
Long time.
I thought it was Arundel County.
I
Well,
think it's
I don't
Cecil.
They gathered
Was it
information.
Cecil? I
They
think
looked
so.
at they looked at what a lot of other counties had done. They brought in speakers. I attended some of the meetings, watched all of them on online or on television. But there were some things that did change with minor tweaks, and others that were a little more substantial. So, for example, around whether we would have 5 commissioners or council members elected
Right.
at large, or 7, 4, or 3, all of that. That was something that was fairly a unique discussion that we had to make a decision about here in Frederick
Wait, I have
County.
a question about something far more interesting than that. What
And how
you're
we drew the
talking about.
lines, too.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, fine.
I'm just going to blurt it because
Do it.
that's me. Why is the county executive hiring all these county retreads? I mean, this is an opportunity for a new government. She's bringing in all these people who worked at the county years ago. I would think it's an opportunity to really get some people, some fresh voices in county government, and yet she's hiring people who had been at the county for years and years are no longer there. Is she going to end up hiring everybody back that Blaine let go?
No, I don't think so, but I do think that there are 2 different issues there.
Okay.
In some cases, what happened was that the Blaine Young board did get rid of some people. There's been discussion as to how many of them were targeted, whether some were on a developer's hit list that were extremely capable at what they did and were widely respected and have outstanding deep experience with the county and things like that you might bring back because they're very good at what they do, and they probably shouldn't have been let go. But in some other cases, I think you've got a situation where there's a real benefit to having some people who really do know county government at a time when it's going through this kind of dramatic transition, and how some of this is going to shift, it's going to change, and I think having a familiarity with the past and the people and the personalities and the systems and how things got to be the way they are, we forget that. Even when the last board came in, they made some pretty significant changes quickly, rearranging whole divisions and departments, subsuming the planning department into the new community development division, changing the name and nature of the economic development, efforts. And so there were a lot of things like that. And I think, so people are trying to figure out, what was the best of what we had? What are the new opportunities that we have in this structure, and how can we take advantage of that? And there's a sense that some of the people who have a lot of experience with the county have a lot to offer in that process.
Yeah, I think part of the positive of having some of those folks back is that we've had to really hit the ground running in a short period of time. If we look on the budget side, the county executive has to present a draft budget very shortly. And so somebody who can come in, understand what the current fiscal year looks like, how to structure a budget, how to make sure that all the essential activities are covered, that's been a real advantage. I think over the long term, though, Katherine, I think you make a great point. With this new form of government gives us some new opportunity to look at organizational differently, look at some new innovative ideas that we haven't looked before. Hopefully over the long term, we have opportunity to do that. I think also the fact that we're looking at a very tight budget. We've got a shortfall from what was projected during the last year, the BOCC, both due to the recession and due to the actions of the Young Board. A number of positions have been eliminated, and so there's less flexibility to kind of move folks around or say, hey, we want to do something new. So I think creativity is going to be a little bit more important under these conditions, and we're certainly not going to see any extra money from the state this year, given the situation they're in.
And there are some new faces.
Well, could it also be a matter of we had a fairly contentious fairly contentious. That's an understatement.
Yeah, really.
County executive race.
Oh.
That is the understatement of the year.
It is.
Well, no one's ever accused me of being understated.
Hashtag bipartisan.
But I imagine there's also a level of who can I trust when
Sure.
Jan
Absolutely.
Gardner gets back into office. Who can I trust? And then we come to the budget issue of Blaine Young's paramour still being employed there in the budget office, and it just.
Well, Catherine, I think you've touched on something that's phenomenal.
Thank you.
I really know. I think that people are sick and tired of old guard, new guard becomes old guard, old guard's out, new guard's in. I think they want real change. And I think that's what we're seeing. It's happening with this social media phenomenon that we saw recently.
Sure.
It's part of, we have an identity crisis here in our county. There's a lot of new people living here that don't know anything. They don't know about going down to the old oak tree to kick the can, when we were growing up in Frederick
Right.
County. They don't know those stories. That old guard out. But then all of a sudden, as a voter myself, I get frustrated because the old guard, I want change, so I vote a new group in. I get change, but then it's the old group.
Right.
And so I want a newer group.
Yeah.
But then they come in and they bring all the old people back.
I know.
You want a third group.
Where are we?
We want a third.
When,
I want a
when
third
do we get
party.
real change?
Yeah, I want a
I think
third
that's
party.
the problem.
Well, I do think, in fairness, whether you agree with all the changes or not, I think that we had a big change between the last two boards of county commissioners, and we are having a big change between the previous board and the new charter government.
Yeah,
in
but
terms
that
of the
change for
leadership.
change's sake. I mean, what he's talking about is, a
What is
whole
the
different
change?
animal.
Yeah, where are we going?
But I do have to, because I have to applaud Jan on one level for being a little bit cautious about making some of these decisions, and I get it. But I'm sure that people want to be working with people they can trust and depend on.
Well, I know I would. So on that note, we'll take a break. We'll come back for our final segment in a couple of minutes. Thank you very much for listening. I think we're already showing that putting a number of people in the studio can change the dynamic of the conversation.
I just ignore it, but they keep saying we laugh just a little too loud, a little stand just a little too close. We stand just a little.
Welcome back. This is Kai Hagen with Eye on Our Community. Thank you for listening this evening. We're here with Michael Betteridge, Katherine Heerbrandt, and Jim Racheff. And if you've been listening, the conversation given us a little bit of a taste of what can happen when you put a bunch of people and you talk about a lot of different things. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that happens when you have 2 hours a day to really talk about some issues. So we have a lot to talk about. We're not going to even begin to even list them all today, much less talk about them in depth. But I do want to make one personal comment here. That is that, as Katherine knows from her years on the radio, you have these short conversations during breaks, commercial breaks and news breaks at other radio stations and what have you. And sometimes you sit there and say, "Wow, that's more interesting than the conversation we were having online," because maybe you're a little less guarded or whatever. But I hope that some of the conversations that we're able to have in the coming weeks and months are similar to some of the ones we've had in the 2 or 3 minutes between segments.
We'll call them the off-air conversations.
Right.
Well, I'll just leave the mic open.
Oh, no.
How's that sound?
May not
we
be a
still
good
have
idea.
to know. We still have to know.
I'll surprise you.
All right. Well, clearly we're going to come back to the issue of the transition to the new charter government, the county council issues, dynamics, the relationship with the county executive, the vision of the county executive, the budget, some of the stuff we've just touched on, very briefly here. And I think there'll be a lot of fodder for a lot of interesting and I hope valuable conversation about all of those things. But what are some of the other issues in this last segment that are going to come up over the next?
Well, we're just talking about the county. Are we also talking about Frederick City?
Yeah, sure,
because
absolutely.
I just
if it's in Frederick County, it's fair game.
yeah, okay. I just went to a short a session for the city meeting last night. I didn't stay until midnight when they voted on the women's shelter on North Market Street, which
the Faith House.
They voted to approve it 4-1. The testimony went on for hours with people on both sides approving and disapproving.
Oh.
Mostly the neighbors were the ones that came out against it, and the people who were for it, a lot of them didn't even live in the city. So on one hand, I understand where the neighbors are coming from, like, hey, this is our neighborhood. You don't live here. I did enjoy one lady who got cut off say, well, there's a lot of underused places for some of these social services, kind of like Upper College Terrace or, some of these places that are a little, across from Hood College. And so I get what she was saying, like, we feel a little bit put upon here. But what bugged me about the entire process, because I went to a workshop, it seemed like months ago, they were talking about the same thing. This thing dragged on,
Sure.
and I blame the city of Frederick. I blame the city of Frederick for not forcing the mission to work more with the neighbors and answering their questions and concerns. I think this whole issue could have been wrapped up a lot more effectively had they let that happen. But then people say, well, the democratic process has to work itself out. Yeah, it does, but it doesn't work itself out without effective guidance from the people that you elected to sit on the board. And the mayor doesn't even show up. And everybody in that room did not believe that he was sick. He didn't show
the mayor
up.
wasn't
Kelly
there
Russell
at the meeting.
Kelly Russell had to lead the meeting. But what that does to me, and it prompts the whole question of, we're going to have more opportunities like this to hopefully place shelters for women and children in the county, possibly.
Sure, right,
Every
right.
time you do that, it happened up in Sibyllsville on 13 acres. Every time you do that,
Right.
people are going to have a concern about it. Why do we act like this is something brand new? Why don't we have more of a process in place to deal with this more effectively?
Well, and I think that's where leadership can come in. I think if you're just trying to sit back and absorb information and letting people butt heads, they're going to butt heads, and it's even going to happen for longer because it's a difficult decision to make, or you want to get a little more information. I'll never fault anybody for wanting to be thorough, for wanting to have a good process, for wanting to gather more information, for not making a rash decision too quickly. But I do think you have to facilitate that process in an effective way. I mean, for example, on the Faith House issue, I think there's universal agreement that this is a good goal, that this is a need in our community that needs to be served. There's differences of opinion maybe about the best way to do that at times, or whose role that should be, or how the community can be involved. But you do understand why the headbutting happened, because I think my feeling was that if people had talk to each other a little sooner, that a lot of that could have been avoided just by really establishing concretely conditions that sort of address the needs of and concerns of some of the people in the community.
To even just assure these people that it's just going to be women. They couldn't even do that.
Well, and that's what I meant by conditions.
Yeah.
Because, just as a disclosure, I should probably point out that my sister actually lives in the house next door.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
She owns it and lives, with her family in the house immediately across the fence.
And she's going to have 76 people living next door to her.
And she hasn't been.
That's insane.
Well, she hasn't objected to it. She's had the experience of living next to it, and when they went through a transition before and expanded with the apartments, there were some issues and some problems. And it was frustrating, and the police were there a number of times, and they had a few things stolen. But they also dealt with the issue, and they dealt with it effectively, and in the end, everything got worked out okay, and she's been completely fine with it. And I think her take on it has been what I sort of think the community's take on it should have been from the beginning, and that is, this is probably a place where this is going to happen, but let's just make sure we do it in a way that allays the concerns.
Exactly.
Instead of treating because I know some of the people felt like their concerns have not been treated as legitimate or valid.
Right.
Well, I think it goes back to that identity issue again, if I want to jump back on that, because I think Frederick has such a unique identity. I mean, how many communities do you know would open the fairgrounds and feed 10,000 people a couple 100,000 pounds of groceries?
Very generous community.
2 years in a row. I mean, this identity, we're at the crossroads of a couple of major interstates. There is a social economic problem underlying this, and there's a tension that's flowing underneath all of this. And I think that really is what's going on.
Well, my concern with some of the bigger, macroeconomic trends and some of the things that we're seeing, not just here in the county and the state, but even wider, though, goes to Catherine's point. The reality is that here we're going to have to probably deal with these kinds of needs more and more frequently. We've got a huge growing senior population. I think in the state of Maryland, 40% people nearing retirement are going to have to subsist almost entirely on Social Security. Here in Frederick County, our rate of seniors are growing at twice that rate of anywhere else in the state. We're going to continue to see this wage stagnation. People are going to need some support and need some help getting transitioned and leaving a dignified life. Kind of dragging this out and kind of beating it to death. I think sometimes the strategy of our government in some of these processes locally are, okay, we're going to have 10 meetings and we're going to let everybody to beat it to death. And then we're going to sit back and we'll deliberate and we'll bring down our decision from on high, rather than saying, hey, look, here's kind of the structure and the boundaries. Here's what we...
Well, hopefully we can learn
we can
from
move
that.
forward.
I would hope so, but it seems like, as someone who covered City Hall for many, many years,
Right.
too many years to count, is that I keep seeing same mistakes repeated over and over and over again. I'm thinking, why don't we learn? And when you talk about this is piecemeal. We're looking at this piecemeal. We've got,
Right.
if you look at the statistics of the growing poverty and the growing need, we've got 800 possible families, and we're going to be able to provide homes for 10. I mean, we need to step back and look at the bigger picture and have a plan,
Right. Well, a good
rather
example-
than be so reactive and then spend 6 months arguing with the neighbors about putting 10 people in a house.
Now, that's a really good point, because we have a situation where, say, if affordable housing is a problem in the community, well, if you have a group like Habitat for Humanity providing a few houses, that is a great thing. It is a total bonus. It isn't a solution. It is one of many potential parts of a solution. And I think so there are really two different conversations here. One is, how do you have a process for talking about these issues and working them out productively? But the other one is, how do you think about them as part of a bigger picture? Because if we're
Right.
going to grow a lot as a community, you're going to be experiencing a lot of these challenges, and the degree to which you grow smartly and have good ways of making these decisions and integrate concerns about, affordable housing and transportation and senior needs into that planning, so that you're not left with having to kind of react to them
Right.
on a piecemeal
Well,
basis,
that's-
whether it's zoning or something else.
That tends to be our strategy, is we react to these symptoms rather than working long term on the underlying causes. And so we need kind of a wider framework to deal with this stuff.
Michael?
Well, I was just going to say, we're just about out of time, so why don't we just go around the room and get kind of a final thought on this?
Okay. Not on this issue, you mean
On the whole, yeah. Right.
I think I've said my final
I
thought.
think we need another 2 or 3 hours to get a final thought on this.
I don't know if we're ever going to
That
get a
issue
final thought,
Yeah.
but I'll just say thank you both to Catherine and to Jim for being willing to participate in this endeavor. I am excited about the opportunity to, I hope, enhance the broader public conversation about some of these issues in a good way. And thank you very much to Michael for the opportunity. And if either of you guys have anything to add, please take a second to do it.
No, I just the same thing. Thank you to all three of you for allowing me to participate. It's always great to have conversations with people that you respect. I respect the two of you very, very much, and so I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you.
Oh, look at that.
So
brief.
I like people that are succinct.
Save the briefest for last. So this is Kai Hagen. This has been Eye on Our Community. We're looking forward to the changes we have around here. Thank you for listening. I hope you'll join us again next week, and we'll see you then.